On January 21st, 1610, Our Lady of Good Success related the following to Venerable Mother Mariana de Jesus Torres. Thus I make it known to you that from the end of the 19th century and shortly after the middle of the 20th century, the passions will erupt and there will be a total corruption of morals. As for the sacrament of matrimony, which symbolizes the union of Christ with His Church, it will be attacked and deeply profaned. Freemasonry will then be in power, will enact iniquitous laws with the aim of doing away with this sacrament, making it easy for everyone to live in sin and encouraging procreation of illegitimate children born without the blessing of the Church. In this supreme moment of need for the Church, the one who should speak will fall silent. One of the great weaknesses of both the pre- and post-Vatican II Church has been a widespread tendency to presume that Catholics already understand and are trying to live the fundamentals of the faith. Many millions do not, as survey after survey makes abundantly clear. A Pew Research report from October of 2018 reported that 33% of Catholics believe in astrology, 36% in reincarnation, and 46% in psychics. Additionally, 61% wanted the Church to permit cohabiting couples to receive communion, 62% to permit those divorced and remarried who do not have an annulment to receive communion, 46% to recognize gay, lesbian marriages, and these numbers keep growing. The flock is being carried off by the world, the flesh, and the devil, yet the shepherds refuse to sound the alarm and cry out the impassioned cry of Peter, "Save yourself from this crooked generation." Many of the most faithful Mass attendees and active parishioners no longer believe what the Church teaches if it conflicts with the culture. Today there is quite a remarkable silence regarding the areas of the truth revealed by God that are most in conflict with our culture. Hardly ever is there a clear sermon on the seriousness of sexual sin, where the sins are actually specified. Scarcely ever is there a sermon on the eternal consequences of not repenting from serious sin, not just sexual sin, but all kinds of sins. Seldom ever is there a clear sermon on the reality and eternal duration of hell and the likelihood of going there if we don't leave the broad way and enter on the narrow way of Christian discipleship. Almost never is there excommunication for so-called practicing Catholics who boldly and publicly deny there is any contradiction between aggressively supporting abortion and same-sex relationships and claiming to be a good Catholic. Because of the toleration of this contradiction and the meek posture of the shepherds, what the Church really believes about these things is raising questions in people's minds about how serious these contradictions of Church teaching really are. Not only that, but there are still professors of theology, priests, and bishops who sometimes directly and very often through studied ambiguity lead the flock away from the living waters of Christ into accommodation with the culture. Very seldom is there ever any correction of such false teaching or deception by omission from those responsible for guarding the flock from error. Sometimes they're even affirmed and protected by cardinals and bishops sympathetic to their views. Sometimes they are even appointed to significant Vatican positions. The refusal of the bishops to judge where they really have the responsible and power to judge, to maintain solidity of doctrine, morality, and mission within the Church, and to keep trying to be a player in the secular culture, thereby remaining silent about the ever-widening chasm between the culture and what the Church really stands for, has done and continues to do grievous harm. The shepherds have allowed themselves to be neutered by fear of men, both within and without the Church. Until bishops overcome their fear, it will be hard for our priests to stand firm and proclaim with boldness, confidence, and joy the whole truth of the gospel. And proclaiming the whole gospel today has to include the truth about heaven and hell, and the truth about those sins which will exclude us from the kingdom unless they are repented of. If we approve of immoral activity through our silence, we are confirming sinners on their path to hell. Pastoral authorities who tolerate doctrinal or moral corruption become implicated in the corruption. It's time to tell people the truth again. It's time for bold prophetic preaching and teaching. We are fools if we continue down these well-worn and treacherous paths which have seen the shipwreck of so many, even in our lifetime. These paths, these strategies, continue to send people out on the broad way that leads to destruction, and hide from them the narrow door and path that leads to real life. We can't stand by while demonic deceptions, dark blindness, and outright stupidity jeopardize the salvation of so many. Authentic Christian service is based on fidelity to the truth. The lessons for bishops and others with pastoral responsibilities is clear. Letting little infidelities go uncorrected today assures that larger infidelities and far more serious problems will develop tomorrow and be even more difficult to confront. Pastoral passivity or negligence, whether in the diocese, the parish, the seminary, the family, or the worldwide church, is an invitation to the world, the flesh, and the devil to play havoc with God's people, whom he purchased at the price of his own blood. This has resulted in the widespread practice of a lukewarm Catholicism, one that is extremely vulnerable to deception and seduction. We must not, by our silence or cowardice, confirm someone else in sin or serious error, or we may, in effect, be denying Christ. Silence and passivity remains a huge obstacle today as we see the unexpected resurgence of a crisis of truth. In order to equip our families, parishes, and dioceses for the situation they are really facing, we need to be vigorous in our teaching and preaching, including the correction of error, admonishment of public sinners, and confrontation with the wolves that both Jesus and the apostles prophesy. will be a problem that emerges from within the church in false teachers and prophets. As the Apostle Paul wrote in his second letter to Timothy, I charge you, in the presence of God and of Christ Jesus, who is to judge the living and the dead, and by his appearing and his kingdom, preach the word, be urgent in season and out of season, convince, rebuke, and exhort, be unfailing in patience and in teaching. For the time is coming when people will not endure sound teaching, but having itching ears, they will accumulate for themselves teachers to suit their own likings, and will turn away from listening to the truth and wander into myths. As for you, always be steady, endure suffering, do the work of an evangelist, fulfill your ministry.